Okay, so let's begin. This is a meeting of the town meeting, Town Manager Acts Review Committee. It is Thursday, November 21st at 5 p.m. We have a quorum of 6 members. A 7th might be showing up, and I appreciate everybody's flexibility in the scheduling of this meeting. It was supposed to have been last night, and for various reasons at my end, it got bumped to today. So thank you all for being so flexible. First on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from November 6th, which I sent out, but not to yesterday, to everybody. Does anybody have any questions or changes or corrections you'd suggest?
Move to accept the November 6th minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes, thank you very much. After our November 6th meeting, the next night I attended, I went to the Board of Selectmen meeting. After their public meeting, they had a workshop in which they were discussing the Town Manager Act, and they asked if I would attend. And I was able to put my hands on copies of the minutes from that workshop, and so I shared them with everybody. The select board was not working to, trying in any way to influence us or to push us along or to tell us what to do. They just thought it would be helpful for us, through me, to have a sense of what their thoughts were with the Town Manager Act when we get to it. Though you can, read through the minutes yourself. Let's see, I gave a summary to somebody in particular saying that that the select board supports the concept, if we're so interested, in removing the residency requirement for the town manager. They also are in favor of, again, if we recommend it, in removing town accountant from that one section of the act. There's other interesting things in here as well. It was a really good hour-and-a-half meeting, so I wanted to report back to you. I have distributed to everybody tonight and also sent by email yesterday kind of a clean copy of the Town Meeting Act with revisions voted by this committee at our last meeting. And it also incorporates written comments that I'd received from Mike Matvichuk and John Almeida, which again, we were also discussed at the meeting. It's not like some hidden thing. It was part of what our discussions were, but I wanted to make it clear it incorporates all of those. There's still a little bit of work to be done on sections 12 and 15, but I thought maybe we would wait to get into the meat of that to allow our invited guest to speak. Mike Trainer, a town meeting member, is here. He was the one who brought the citizens petition about a recall to town meeting, and at town meeting, the vote was to send that matter to our committee to consider. Mike and I've been in some communication, and he sent an email to me on November 19 with a couple of additional insights into the process and descriptions of what's happened. He also had included a link or a copy of the petition itself, of what the citizens petition looked like. John Almeida was very kind and had converted that to a Word document, triple space, so that we could do what we did with the Town Meeting Act, so we'd be able to go through it and make comments. So if you guys are all...
So 3 documents in total about, okay.
Yep. So if you guys are all in agreement, why don't we let Mike come and explain or describe to us this act? And Mike, if you'd like, you could be at the podium, or if you prefer, you could just sit here down at the end after Mr. Jaworski, and as long as you've got a mic nearby.
Would you mind if I sat?
No, we love it.
So basically, what this is, I think everyone here has kind of sat through, the presentation I made on this at the last 2 town meetings. Basically, what I looked at is Danvers has no way to remove someone from office if they're deemed unfit or, the public feels that they shouldn't be sitting in office. There's no way. It's up to the individual person. You could be convicted of a crime, you could be making, say racist comments, you could just, there's a number of things that could happen. And it's up to the individual person whether or not they want to resign. And they could sit there for 3 years, and the citizens really don't have a say in it at that point. A lot of communities in recent years, especially like the last 5 or so, have put recall processes in place. And I actually thought it would be a good thing for Danvers to have this. And it's just, the reason I do it is I care about the community. I care a lot about like how we look. What you want someone to represent us in a positive light. One of the things that I did with this, the language really, when you look at from town to town, doesn't vary that much. They all kind of follow the same process. So we're not really reinventing the wheel here. A lot of other towns have put this into, cities and towns, I should say, have put this into place recently. It's a very difficult process to do, and that's on purpose, because you really want to have the entire town on board with this in order to remove a person from office. If this ever gets used, they're very rarely used, but we will have this protection in place. Basically, this is a 3-tier system, the way it works. The first is step 1, which that just basically starts a time clock. What that is someone would gather 350 signatures and then turn them into the town clerk, who at that point would certify the signatures. What that does is that's a starting point. From that point there, in order to actually have a recall election, someone would have to get 20% of the registered voters to sign that petition that the town clerk creates, and they have 20 business days to do it. So that's roughly 4 weeks. Okay, so essentially in this town, as it stands right now from it's the last town election. So as of right now, you'd have to get 4,522 signatures, and you'd have to do that in 4 weeks. Just to kind of put that in perspective, I know a few years ago we kind of put the CPA on the ballot. That we needed a little over 1,000 signatures, and it took 4 months to get. Okay, so I'm just pointing out this is very difficult to execute. It's not something that's going to be used all the time. It's kind of like an emergency situation. If it comes up, it might be 30 years from now that this comes up. These are very, like I said, you can look them up. They're not used all that often. Okay, so then if you do get that number of signatures, the person at that point knows they're going to be recalled. They do have the ability to resign at that point. If they don't, we move forward with a recall election. Essentially, people go and vote, and they can vote that person out of the office. And the way it works from there is the rest of the board, if that person does get removed from office, or if they do resign, the rest of the board, as stated in the Town Manager Act, finds a replacement until the next election, is essentially the way it works. There's other provisions in there that people kind of, I'm just trying to think of some of the questions that have come up. There's also if you have 6 months left on your term, we wouldn't have an election at that point. There's also, someone asked the question about the first 6 months, you can't be removed. I didn't actually know the answer for that at the time, but I do know it now. The reason for that is it prevents the entire, so in a very odd situation, I'm just bringing up all the scenarios that could happen with these. And like I said, every city and town is kind of the same. Potentially, you could remove more than one member. What this does is, if you have 6 months, you can't be removed the first 6 months, you can't be removed the last 6 months. Essentially, you couldn't remove the whole board, and that's why that's in there.
As a safety.
Yeah, it's a and like I said, that was a big question that came up, but I didn't know the answer to it, and I actually asked another city or town why it was in there, and that was kind of the explanation with it.
Can I ask a question,
Yep.
Mike? I don't quite follow because surely there could be multiple petitions going on at one time.
Yep,
So why would that prevent from removing a whole board?
because you can't be removed the first 6 months of your term, and you can't be removed the last 6 months of your term.
Okay,
Because the board members are staggered
Oh, I
anyway,
see.
Yeah.
sometime,
got it.
And that was the reason behind that. Someone asked that question, I didn't have an answer for it, so I figured I'd bring it up with this board. There are other towns, so the way I did this was a home rule petition, and when someone's removed, it kind of fell to the Town Manager Act. There are a couple other towns that do it as, if there is a recall election, there's another vote to vote someone in. That would contradict our Town Manager Act, but just bringing that up, that is done in other communities. Obviously, this would have to be changed in order to do it that way. But as a general rule, I think we have had select board members resign. I think we have had school committee members resign, and they've just been replaced until the next election.
I have a question, Sally, if I
Make
may.
sure you-
It might be
Yeah.
Director Sally.
Make sure you're talking into the mic.
I'm sorry, yes. Would such a scenario come under the Town Manager Act, the Town Meeting Act? Because it sounds like that it could affect anybody who's been elected.
No.
Is that correct?
Only townwide officials.
Only
not-
townwide
not town
officials.
Not
Okay.
town meeting members.
Okay, so to continue that thought, obviously, the town manager is not elected. He's appointed, so he or she would not be under this. It would only include those positions that we all know are elected positions, correct?
And so the town manager, for instance, does not appoint people who are in elected positions, right? So it would not affect the Town Manager Act responsibilities, because they wouldn't be people that come within town manager's responsibility.
So I guess that then logistically, that's my question, like, since it doesn't apply to the town manager, would this come under a separate piece altogether, or would it come under some other, where would we put this, I guess?
I don't think our task is to incorporate this into either the Town Meeting Act or the Town Manager Act. It's kind of a standalone, in my view. But the town meeting felt in May that the best way is, since we were already convening to review the other acts, to review this too. It's kind of I don't see it as being folded into either.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Go
quick
ahead.
question? So thank you for explaining the 20% for the 350 to start, like, to file the affidavit. Is that, can you just explain the basis of that number? Is that a percentage? Is that consistent with other towns?
It's-
I just wanted to know where that
it's-
number came from.
It's actually kind of higher than other towns. Like, for example, Saugus is just 50 signatures. Same thing with Arlington. I mean, Arlington has 33,000 people, and they
Yeah.
only need 50 signatures. I don't know if it's that way just because the town clerk has to go through and certify all of them.
Right.
I thought that was high enough. Someone may try it, but the real task comes in on the second wave.
Right.
So, say someone did want to just see if they could get someone on the select board, they could probably get 350 signatures, but they're gonna realize it gets really complicated after
Yeah.
that, and they're probably not gonna do it again unless, like I said, the way this is structured, I personally think the entire town has to be on board with this. I mean, a town election, I couldn't even find one where we got 20% of the
Right.
registered voters, so that's generally more
Yeah.
than vote in the elections.
And is that 20% just in looking at other towns pretty similar, or is that higher than other towns?
I would say it's actually higher.
Okay.
I did find one that was 25%, but that particular town had a longer time frame
Okay.
to get signatures. So I think we're definitely on the higher end. Quite a few of them, I'm just looking at some of these examples here, are like 10%, 15%. New Bedford's actually working on one now, and they were at 15%. Some of the feedback they got from the city council is they thought it should be higher.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's kind of where that's at now.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Thank you for coming and thank you for presenting to us. You know, when this was presented to the town meeting, my reaction was, and I think I've said this multiple times through the course of our discussions, that the problem I see with local government is that we have folks a hard time getting folks engaged. And so I was a little discouraged that why are we looking at putting something out there that is about getting rid of people and maybe would scare people from interest in town government. But as I've dug into it a little more, and you know, your point that the numbers required to do this are so high, I think that can be, like, it's really not a threat to the typical, you know, candidate or person holding a position to fear that this is going to be used against them, because it is as you pointed out, the numbers are so high and the timelines are so short that it would have to be something egregious, I think, for it to succeed. That being said, I think it is important that we spell out maybe a little bit more in this home rule petition a couple more things that would make it clear that this shouldn't be used as a political weapon, that this is about real malfeasance by, you know, elected officials. So I've added some language in the red line that I've shared with the committee to that effect, that, you know, a couple of points. First, that it's something that's happened while you're in office. So we can't go back and find something from some years before someone was elected and then drag that out as a reason for a recall. So that's something that I think is important, that it be tied to while they're in office. And then a second point, let's make it articulate some kind of standard. So it's not, you know, that it is not, and I think you've done that to a certain degree, that it can't be based on a vote. But I think I would make it a little more explicit with the suggested language that I added to it. And one other point, with the 6-month thing, I honestly don't know that it's worth the effort for someone who only has 6 months left in their term, or 7 months left in their term, to go through the effort of a recall election, the time and expense that would take the town. I can understand if someone is way out there and we think it's a bad, you know, person to be representing us. But at the same time, I think we can wait out 6 months. I think we can wait out a year, honestly, for someone to just kind of slink off into the sunset. So those are my thoughts.
So let's talk about them right now while
Yep.
Mike is here. So, and I'm sorry I didn't share with you the red line version that John has put together. But he first is in section 1. He suggests changing the 6 months to 12 months. What do you think about that?
So, it's up to you. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but when I think about it, right, citizens are the ones that are in control about this. If they're signing, if I knew someone only had, say, 7 months left, as a citizen, people are gonna say, hey, this isn't worth it. It's not worth the expense. It's not worth the trouble at that point. I mean, granted, you can put a year in there. It's up to you. I think people can look at a situation and kind of make a judgment call on that. You know, I just did that because the reason is a lot of these have passed legislation. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't want to go kind of reinventing the wheel on a lot of it. I wanted something that I knew was going to be legal, that if it went to the legislature, they would look at it and say, hey, this is already passed, essentially. So that's why I didn't change a lot in it, besides certain numbers and certain positions to make it more relevant to Danvers versus another town. Personally, I would probably just keep the 6 months, just because it seems that's what other communities do. I think there's one I saw that was 3 months, which I wouldn't reduce it, certainly. I think 6 months we can kind of go through. And as for the spelling out, so that's another thing that's come out, just spelling out why someone can be removed. I haven't found a city or town that has that in there. And I think the reason for that is who makes that judgment call? You know what I'm saying? If you're charged with a crime but not convicted of, it's kind of putting the onus on the voting citizens to say, hey, we want to have this election or we don't. I mean, it could just work out in a sense that, yeah, say you can be removed for these 3 reasons. Someone could kind of fight that, and even in this thing, and I copied this from Wenham, it says that you can't be removed for the way you vote. When we actually went to town council, and I think this was said, it was either the select board meeting or the finance committee meeting, it's in there, but at the same time, the town clerk wouldn't make that determination. It would just be, it would move forward if we had enough votes.
So it's based on the number of,
Yeah,
votes,
so
yeah.
although that's in there, no one in this town was gonna make that determination, or at least that's what was told to me, when it was reviewed. Just cause and I think it was Steve that said, he said you wouldn't put that onus on the town clerk.
to make a decision whether or not you met grounds.
And that could be changed. I'm just saying that was the feedback that was given to me from the language that was put in here.
Yeah, I
'Cause
think that's a slippery slope
Yeah.
to pinpoint only certain things, because if we missed something, like like maybe those of us here don't have the mindset that we're gonna do anything egregious, right, in a position. So we might not be able to think of all the different scenarios of all the different reasons why. And if we missed one reason that people were like, oh my gosh, like, you guys forgot that one reason for removal or for starting the petition, yeah, I think it would look bad on us. I think just leaving it up to the masses to say that was bad enough that we want that person removed because we feel it was, egregious enough.
And it also gives the opportunity for the person in charge to kind of dispute it,
Right.
whereas if you don't have that in there,
Right.
it's up to the voting public. And if they want to spend thousands of dollars to have another election, that's a choice the public makes. And it's not a small portion of the public, it's a good chunk of the town.
So, especially when you look at the percentage that generally turn out to vote. But I don't know, John, if you thought about this, when talking about who makes that decision, it would be, the petition would be presented and the town clerk would have to
Yeah.
be the one deciding, is it egregious or not?
Well,
And that job, the clerk's job should be, the phrase that I see is ministerial. Are there enough numbers, and are the people who signed registered voters? So I could see that point of not putting it on the town clerk to decide, okay, yep, you've met all these other ground rules.
yeah, I can understand that perspective. And the language that I suggested wasn't like a narrowing, I don't think. It was just to make it clear that this isn't intended to be a political, axe to grind.
Right.
That it's malfeasance. Which
Oh,
is not-
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I thought you wanted it spelled out, like
No.
what someone had to have done.
John's
Oh,
proposed
yeah. Oh, no, of
language here.
course. People
Yeah.
have to understand. This is like,
It's not like,
Big-
I disagree with, your position
Right.
on such and such.
Right.
It's malfeasance.
right. And honestly, I really don't think anybody could get signature,
Even
the
350.
signatures, because I would never sign something, and I would hope that most of the town would take this serious enough and not sign something based on, unless there was like a huge, like it better show up in the newspaper, it better be on TV, it better be something big, right? I mean, and not just, I would hope most people would understand, like, this isn't like an axe to grind kind of a thing, this is,
Yeah, and that's my concern
Yep.
with it, is that we make it clear to all involved.
Right.
So we're not
Right.
scaring
Well,
people out of
right,
interest,
and-
who
but
might be
honest-
otherwise interested in
but
public
honestly,
office.
with all these other cities and towns, and they haven't put it into place yet, I think hopefully people get the idea that this is a checks and balances kind of a thing, not just because, you don't like how someone voted, or you don't like what they stand for, or what color they dyed their hair, so, yeah, right.
John, were you about to say something? I'm concerned with your language trying to say it has to only be while in office.
Yeah.
And a part of what comes to mind when I see language like that is, what if we found out that somebody that had been elected to the school committee or the select board or the trustees, library trustees, that there had been a terrible crime when, you know, a bad act when they were, you know, 20 years ago, before anybody in town knew them, and it didn't come out. I mean, I think there could be a time when something that happened before somebody came into office could pose a problem to the citizens that they might want to take action.
But I would respond to that by saying that's what elections are for. Like, people should be vetted before they're elected into office.
But that doesn't always happen.
Right, it doesn't always happen, but.
So, but I think, I mean, I share your concern, but I do think that that is a mechanism. If someone is in elected office and something comes out, whether it's, you know, criminal related or corrupt, whatever it might be, I think you do almost need to give people the opportunity. If they didn't know about that at the time of the election, they almost do need the opportunity to respond to that.
I don't know.
Let's say you found out that somebody was a pedophile, you found out that somebody had fraudulently not disclosed during an election process, that they had, I don't know, filed for bankruptcy 8 times, or, I mean, it's just trying to think of examples of things that could have happened before they came into office, but you don't know, and in a town election, it's not like there's some entity that vets people. If somebody.
Right, but there aren't qualifications in that regard either,
Right.
typically. So I don't know. What you're trying, I think what I'm afraid of is that where that would be sort of making, like, re-upping the political process, that re-upping a campaign on criteria that weren't in place. It wasn't a disqualifier, presumably, from holding office, because none of these offices really have qualifications other than living in the town. I don't know, it
Right.
just strikes me as, again, I want to make it like narrow and, you know, kind of the egregious situations of elected officials, not someone's past.
Well, and
So-
especially if they've already been paid for whatever, like, do we make them pay again? Like, what if, so like, say somebody already paid for a crime years ago or whatever, I mean, how do you make them pay again? I mean, like, by kicking them out of office if they've already, like, say they stole or something, and they already paid restitution, and they've already made their amends, and yeah, because really, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's on us to do vetting when the whole town doesn't do vetting, right? So you can get on the school committee and not even have a query check done on you, maybe, I don't know, right? So then how can we do that? Yeah, I think it should be while they're in office.
And the thing is, some things come up after the fact. Like, when I think back, there's been people locally that have been in childcare settings, and they've, you know, watched kids after, and then it's been years later that a lot of things come out, and that could happen with someone that's on the school committee. If you went back, say, hey, 10 years ago, all this stuff happened, it was big news, and that person's sitting on the school committee, and they're gonna sit there for another 3 years while all these allegations come up. I mean, these are very rare situations, but they could happen. And like I said, the chances of this actually being enacted are really small. It's just a protection, and that's, I think we should have it in place.
John?
The other thing, too, is that if I'm reading this correctly, the "we," meaning the citizens, will make the delineation of, does that past act actually impact there? And I think that it's important for us to trust that
The process.
cohort of people who are going to make the voting and say, you decide. If it was 10 years ago, 20 years, whatever they did, you decide. And I think that's the way I feel comfortable with, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, if I could,
Please.
our job is to set up the process and to say that, well, let's let the people decide. I think to a certain degree, sure, the people are ultimately going to decide. Whatever we come up with, the petition process is for the citizens to decide, and the vote will be the citizens to decide. But I think part of our job is to set up whatever, you know, guardrails that we think are appropriate for a fair process and a potentially, you know, I'm looking at it also from the perspective of the town clerk. Does the town clerk really need to be chasing down 350 signatures on a frivolous petition that has no basis, or, you know, like, that's part of my concern. And so I do want to have guardrails on it.
I do
And
feel,
I think a fair guardrail is actions after they've been elected into the position. I think that's a fair guardrail.
I
Yeah, 'cause when you
disagree
go
with
back
that
to-
personally, but
Oh,
that's
do you?
just me.
Yeah, because I mean, do you go back to something that someone did as a teenager? Like, yeah, how far back do you go? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely a hard one. I guess I can see both sides, but I think, I thought the intent of this to begin with was while someone was in office, something that they did, because if it happened in the beginning of their term, you know, and we couldn't always, you know, I remember having this discussion with someone, and it was, oh, don't worry, in 3 years, they're just one vote, in 3 years, they could get voted out. And then they get reelected because of name recognition or because people don't pay, whatever. So and it was over something that happened while the term was going on. So I thought that was the intent myself.
I think that is the intent, and again, just the sheer volume of people that would need to enact this. If you're looking back, someone stole something 20 years ago, you're probably not gonna get to a recall point.
Right.
It's gotta be something pretty bad.
Yeah.
And then, even if we do have a recall, you actually have an election where over 50% of the people that
Right.
vote have to vote them up. So it's
Right.
really, I think would have to be an egregious act to enact
Yeah.
this, personally.
I personally think the check is the process. Like, I see John's argument, and I do, but, I mean, even this language as written there's room for interpretation. You still might get frivolous sort of affidavits filed, but I do think that the check is that 20% barrier, or maybe the check is you increase the number of signatures needed to file the affidavit. I don't know, but I worry that my worry is that if we make the language more prescriptive, it also gets more confusing, because then you start getting into, I mean, I know it's not spelled out here specifically, but someone could say, well, what's malfeasance? What's misconduct? And there's a lot of interpretation there. So I understand the argument, but I'm also wondering if we're going to add unnecessary confusion into the process. That's just my perspective.
Well, John, you highlight, you came right to what the issues are in putting together a provision like this. One question I had for you, Mr. Trainer, is, just to delineate you from the other mic at the table, is, do you know where did the template come from?
So you can look, this one is basically ones that I went through and made it more relevant to Danvers. But, I mean, I have New Bedford's here. It's the same. But they all kind of follow the same process. A few towns, Andover actually did a study on this where they included a couple of them. They all follow the exact same process. I haven't found one that really has deviated much from this. It would actually, at one point, I found it on the UMass website. It's not on there anymore, but it just seems like it's pretty standard. But to answer your question, this language came from when?
Okay, and in all of the work that you've done, looking at the different versions of the act, do any of them have language talking about what would qualify, what behavior would?
I have not found one. Some of them are hard to find. So the home rule petition ones, which it seems that's what most cities and towns are doing recently, those are all on the state website. You can go, you can read through them. I have not found a single one of these that outlines specific acts that you could be removed for. And I know that's come up a couple times. I don't know if that's a question you can ask other cities and towns. I have not found one that has that language in it.
Go ahead, John.
I just had a question about this raised a question for me as to the Town Manager Act, Town Meeting Act.
Remember to talk into your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The Housing Authority, I didn't find reference to the Housing Authority in either Town Managers Act or Town Meeting Act.
They're appointed, but, oh no,
No,
they're,
they're elected.
it's elected.
Like a 5-year term, right?
So I can explain the housing authority. So I didn't want this to contradict itself because the language said all townwide positions. Some of those positions are elected, and my understanding is some of them are appointed. What I was told by town council is they didn't have an opinion on the housing authority. Once this got to legislate, if you read through this, they have the ability to edit it
I'm sorry.
to make it legal. That might be one point of contention. We weren't sure. So from what I was told, the town did not have an opinion on the housing authority.
I guess my question is, do you know where in the town's, it's not in the Town Manager Act, it's not in the Town Meeting Act, where in the town's law does I guess the creation of the town's housing authority, where does that come from? And, because the language in here talks about how replacements occur, and that's spelled out for those other offices in the Town Managers Act and the Town Meeting Act, but it's not spelled out as to the,
So it does, this
housing
does not
authority.
talk about how replacements, I didn't, did you see it in
well, yeah,
here?
there's reference to, where is it?
Because my understanding is it just referred to this, which it's spelled out for school committee, it's spelled out for select board, not all of them are spelled out.
Right,
in
right,
this.
so, but if you connect it to both the Town Manager Act and the Town Meeting Act, I think that covers all of the elected bodies except for the Housing Authority. And so
Okay.
that's my question is, how does the town, like, if there's a vacancy in the Housing Authority, how are those vacancies filled? And
How's it done now? I mean,
that's,
yeah. I mean, that's
So I'm-
that's how it would. I don't know. So this doesn't specify, because like I said, you can't, this was designed to be its own standalone thing, and it wasn't going to contradict the Town Manager Act or the Town Meeting, or the Town Charter, or whatever we're reviewing here. It always referred to what was in here is what would happen. Same as we're doing now. If there was a vacancy on the select board now, this spells out
And when
how
you
to
say,
replace
and
it.
when you say this, just for people who can't see what
Oh,
you're
I'm
holding up, it's
sorry,
the
yeah.
Town Manager Act.
Town Manager Act, yes. So the Town Manager Act spells out for the select board and the school committee how it's replaced. I personally didn't see some of the other ones in there, so I'm not sure how we're doing it. Like if someone were to, I don't know if anyone's left the housing committee or the library trustees, what you do in that instance, but I couldn't find any sort of direction that the town has for those. And that's kind of beyond a recall. That's if someone were to leave one of those boards.
Do you know, Natalie, on
So for the library, we choose
you so
someone
you vote-
until, and they finish out the term.
yeah, and I believe that the library, I thought that the library trustees were in the Town Meeting Act. I'd have to, I thought that I saw that, which I thought was odd.
I don't
But
remember
then
it there.
just in terms of like nailing it down,
I can try to find that out. I will
Yeah.
look into that.
I think I have a misconception.
Okay.
When you presented this to the town meeting,
Yep.
I had thought that we as town meeting members accepted it. Is that, am I,
So
I
let me,
I don't have the exact
Yeah.
warrant in front of me.
I can explain.
Go ahead,
or unless
please.
you want to, Sally. So
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
first time we voted on it, there was, so it was going on the finance committee's recommendations, okay? And when we did the amendment, we did a voice vote, and it was determined that didn't pass. So the second time around, we did a standard vote. And that was to agree with the finance committee's recommendation or disagree. At that time, I believe 38 people agreed with it and 110 disagreed with it. Technically, it probably passed, but there was no motion, so it was almost like a no vote. That's why it was able to be presented the next year. The finance committee's recommendation the next year was to send it to this committee. And when I heard that, I mean, I probably could have made another amendment, we could have voted on it, but I thought maybe more than one person than myself should look at this, and that's why we're sitting here now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've been working on this a long time. How, is there a particular motivation that you had for working so hard on it?
I think it's just more, at the time when I started this, I think, Dan, I'll tell you the story,
Yeah,
actually.
please.
I was at work one day. And I went into the kitchen and people were talking and they said, oh, where are you from? And I said, oh, Danvers. And at the time, there was a lot of not so great things or press with Danvers, and the reaction was, ooh, Danvers. And I just looked at it, and that was not an elected official, that was not why we were in the news, but it could have been. And I just want to live in a community I'm proud of, and I just wouldn't want myself, my kids, or anyone in this town to be just viewed not, like if you had a select board member that was sitting there for 3 years making comments, I mean, I think at one, was talking about citizens, painting a negative light, standing in the square, holding a sign that's not that great, and people are driving through like, who's this? And it's like, well, that person's elected, you know? I don't think that's good for the town. You know, I'm not gonna say, and like I said, a lot of cities and towns enact this. There's, any way you do it, there's some flaws with it. I just don't think leaving it up to the individual person and having no control over that is the best course of action, in my opinion. Okay, I have no skin in this. There's nothing, this may never be used. Many select board members, or a few select board members, I should say, have pointed out they can't think of a time where this ever would have been enacted so far in this town. But it's just there as a protection, that's all.
Right?
You've obviously done a lot of research and work on this, Mike. I compliment you for that, and anybody in the town that stands up for what they believe in. I'm honestly on the fence on this, and it really boils down to one point, and you made the point yourself in your first few sentences. You made the statement, citizens don't have a choice or a say. And in my view, they do have a say, and it really is the democratic process. If a person got elected by the majority of the voters in an election, based on what they said then, they can and just as easily be removed in a democratic process in a subsequent election. If someone is to do something so terrible, so, I hate to use the word egregious because it's been used tonight, but something that's been so terrible and clearly a felony, let's say, they're gonna end up in jail anyway. So, and then to tack on stipulations or conditions that make it almost impossible for this recall to take place, I just, it puts me on the fence, and I really wonder whether or not we leave the process up to the voters themselves, who really do have a say at the polls.
In my opinion, this leaves it up to the voters
Yeah.
if we enacted this. And like I said, my concern is, yes, you can have an election, but that election could be 3 years later.
Yep.
3 years is a long time,
Yep.
okay? And like I said, just, the world's different than it was 10 years ago, just with social media. And if you had someone that wasn't quite right on one of these boards, we're gonna be in the news. I hate to say it, like,
Right.
every single meeting for 3 years, and it's like, do you want that as a community?
And it could
Or do you-
be longer after that, because as I say, people get elected on name or incumbent or whatever in this town. I've seen it happen many times. You know, someone that was in a nursing home got elected. I don't trust, I don't trust that is gonna work going forward. I think there has to be a checks and balances system. I think we should have had this several years ago myself, but.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I can't think of a time since I've lived here this would have been used, but I can say that I voted for someone that I don't think was a good fit after. And I think there were a couple things that were done that I didn't particularly agree with. I'm not sure you would have got enough people to enact this over some of those things, but it just goes to show, this is the person I voted for, but then I have to wait 3 years because I don't think they should be, I didn't know what I voted for. thought I voted for the best candidate at the time, but in my opinion, I don't think they were. And that could happen easily, because you don't know, especially when someone's new, how they're gonna act, how they're gonna take the position. You don't, I don't know. And like I said, I just, I think this protection should be in place for that reason, and I think that puts it more to the voters, as you said yourself, than waiting 3 years to do it.
Go ahead,
Are we
John.
at the point, I don't mean to squelch any more discussion, but there has been a lot of discussion. Is it appropriate to make some sort of motion to accept or not? Or are we looking at amendments to this? I'm not sure where we are as a committee and how we move.
Well, John Almeida did take the work of going through and making some red line suggestions that, I mean, most of them we've talked about now. It's completely up to the committee. I mean, if you all felt so inclined, we could, if someone were to so move, we could vote on whether to recommend to town meeting the citizens petition as drafted, or we could vote to recommend that as amended by John's comments, or we might want to decide to take some more time to look at John's comments and kind of talk those things through. So I could see, do you think that's the three choices really we're facing right now? I mean, I've had a pretty busy, crazy past week because of family issues, but, so I haven't really had a chance to go through your stuff, John, though. You sent it to me several days ago. So I don't feel quite prepared myself, but others might, because you guys are in a different spot than me.
And I might suggest that when we have more of the committee at the table,
I agree.
it might be better to hold off till everyone's,
Yeah.
more than we have today.
Yeah, I know we have a quorum, but I think this is a pretty important conversation. I'd like to discuss it more with,
Because there's
Full committee.
four of our members are
Right.
not here.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this until the next meeting, when we have more committee members to go over John's proposed amendments to the document.
I'll second that motion. No, I think it's, no.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thanks very
Thanks,
much, Mike.
Mike.
And-
thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
I will.
nice job, Mike.
And if you'd like, obviously, there are public meetings, and you're certainly welcome to come back. I'll tell you when our next meeting will be. Is Wednesday, December 4, at 6 o'clock in this room. So feel free to come back, but
Okay.
to me, I'm just so grateful on behalf of the committee for you to come tonight and to share, you shared a lot of information with us. So
Thank you.
feel free to come back if you wish, but don't feel you have to. You know what I'm trying to say?
I will be here. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mike.
for coming.
So Natalie, you moved, John seconded. And all in favor, okay. Well, that's very interesting. So within our packet tonight, we had John's Word document, triple-spaced, of the recall provision. And then a second one, which has his red line versions, which just came out kind of gray, but I thought it was discernible. And then we have the actual citizens petition, which Mike Trainer had forwarded to me. So those three things. So, one of the other things in our packet, which I already mentioned tonight, is what I consider a clean version, if you will, instead of red lines and strikes and so on and so forth, of the things that we've agreed to so far. But everybody should look at it and compare it to your notes and make sure, I didn't miss something, because in the process of trying to keep track in my notes of what we do and what our discussions are, I could easily have missed something. But there are a couple sections that that still need work by all of us. One, I believe, is section 12,
Yes. I think it was 12 and 15.
12 and 15. So 12 was the one that talked about the order of the elections, and we've talked about wanting to have, so this is the Town Meeting Act. We've talked about changing the order of elections and town meetings, so that we've talked about having the election of town meeting members happen after town meeting. I can say that when I was before the select board at their workshop, there was at least some discussion of disagreement with that concept, and I wanted to share it with you. I had, before that select board workshop, I told them that we had discussed this issue at length, and I shared with them the chart that Dan Gagnon prepared of those communities with representative town meetings and the number holding elections before town meeting and those after. One of the select board members felt that if town meeting members were elected after town meeting, and we were talking about it just being like a month after, he was saying that that would mean that person would wait a whole year before doing the work that they were just elected for. And his concern was that person might lose interest in the course of that time, lose track of what the issues are. That doesn't necessarily guarantee they're going to then start either attending or listening to budget meetings, FinCom meetings, all the other stuff, so that they're informed when they come to town meeting 11 months later to vote. I wanted to share that with you because it seemed pretty logical. Because I had told them that part of our concern is lack of engagement with some town meeting members. Similarly, I had reached out to the town clerk about, and I shared this email chain with you, to ask her about that time period between town meeting and between the election and the town meeting, and our concern about whether there's sufficient time for new town meeting members to prepare adequately. And if there was a reason for the town election to be the first Tuesday in May, and for the annual town meeting to be the third Monday in May. And her answer was that there wouldn't be any specific reason for the meeting, that the meeting date, town meeting date, couldn't be changed, but it would probably be something we'd have to run through town council and the current acting town manager, who's also the head of the finance stuff in town, Rodney. She was saying that the town meeting in May makes sense with the fiscal year starting July 1, because town meeting takes votes on a budget that begins just 2 months later, a month and a half later. So that's one reason, that's part of that cycle. People generally don't want to meet over the summer or over the winter, so having a spring meeting makes sense from that perspective. And then she mentioned that we should keep in mind the every 4-year election cycle. So I asked her, what does that mean exactly? And she pointed out, I should know, but she said each presidential election year, for instance, 2016, 2020, 24, 28, et cetera, there are 4 elections. In March, there's the presidential primary. In May, there's the annual town election. In September, there's a state primary, and then November, the presidential election. Every 4 years, there are 3 elections. So the non-presidential years, there's 3 elections: the May annual, the September state primary, and the November state election. And in the years between that, we just have the annual town election. So changing election dates is going to impact that whole cycle if we change the date of the town election. So that was some of the input on that. Also, Kathy was kind enough to share with me some of her thoughts on the engagement piece. And she pointed out that it's not just new town meeting members, that there are long-term town meeting members who come in and haven't reviewed stuff before they get to town meeting. So a couple of ideas she had is that in her mind, it's not the timeline that's the issue, it's the lack of preparedness of current as well as new town meeting members. And she thought, maybe having a mentoring buddy system where we match up a new town meeting member with a town meeting member who's been around for a while might be an idea. And also, she was saying, and this discussion was at that workshop meeting with the select board, that when a person comes in to turn in their nomination papers, at that point, the town clerk said they're given a packet. And I think that we can make that process maybe a little more formalized. The town meeting handbook is okay, but it doesn't go into stuff like how you can become engaged in the budgetary process, about the FinCom meetings being in person or to watch, remotely. Doesn't really talk about how the bulk of the initial part of town meeting is going to be passing a budget, and you need to know a little bit about that in order to vote properly. So it seems to me that at that point, when people are either pulling nomination papers or when they come back and they have their signatures, or maybe not till after they're elected, I'm not sure where in the process, that we could maybe establish something that's more satisfactory in our way of thinking, to give people the information they need to be the best town meeting members they can. And maybe that town meeting handbook is where we could put in language like, this committee, which met in 2024, recommends that somehow there be precinct meetings. I don't know that we can get that in the act so much, but maybe we could work it into the town meeting handbook. Or to encourage town meeting members to meet with other town meeting members in their precinct at some point before an actual town meeting, so you kind of know each other, and I don't know, stuff like that. But so it kind of gave me a new perspective. We didn't vote on it at our last meeting because it was still up in the air, we still had information to find. But, so the question is, should we recommend changing the order of the meeting, of the election for town meeting members and the annual town meeting? Should we leave it the way it is? Go ahead.
Yeah, if folks weren't able to watch the workshop, or I watched it on television, and I thought it was interesting. I don't know if it's still available on DCAT or YouTube or whatever, but I thought it was interesting that the point that you brought up was one that I never thought of. It was sort of the strike while the iron's hot, and giving the person, 10 months to sit and stew. That's not necessarily going to get them engaged in the process any more than if they were elected in the springtime. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. And I think the points that you just made about giving the materials to candidates for town meeting, I think the earlier you do that, the better. So I would suggest when they pull their papers, don't wait till they get the signatures, don't wait till they're like, get it in their hands as soon as possible, because they could get engaged that winter, right? If they know, oh, these meetings are happening, I gotta get, down to town hall, I gotta get to this place, I think that would be my preference. And as far as changing the date, I think the way we talked it through, it sounded like June made sense, and then if you go past June, you'd want to wait till the fall, and then I think you're going to run into problems with the election cycle, where we're going to have a town election in September and then another election in November. That might cause confusion and frustration among voters. So
Election fatigue.
I guess I'm of the view that we either keep it where it is or move it till shortly after the town meeting, like early June. But if not those two times, I don't think I would recommend another time of the year.
Yeah, I lean towards keeping it as is. I don't, in all this discussion, and I agree with John. I thought Dee's point was a really strong one of getting people engaged, and I just don't see I don't see a compelling enough reason to change it, especially with this discussion of looking at other avenues to increase engagement. I think we'd be better served looking at those sorts of things to increase engagement in the process, get people involved earlier, versus changing without any sort of clear benefit to it. Because I think when you look at the scope of all the elections, my worry too is if you start moving things around, are you going to get lower voter turn? Like, there are downsides to it. So I think in the absence of like a clear benefit for changing it, I would lean towards keeping it the same.
I just want to, it's a little not quite on point, but I'd forgotten to mention, I want to make sure, the town clerk has told me that she always sits with people and answers any questions they may have when they come to pull nomination papers.
Yeah.
So she'll take all the time, but not everybody would know to ask, to ask.
Right.
And the town moderator also says that she makes herself very available, after the election and before the town meeting. But again, I don't know, I wouldn't have known that I could call her or meet with her, whatever. So that's part of what I'm thinking, if we get our hands on the materials that are handed out, we might be able to make some concrete suggestions on those. Though they're not ours to draft or not, I think all we can do is make suggestions. And I do feel that, I know that the town moderator puts on a town meeting school.
Yes.
But again, not everybody can attend because of work schedules and so on and so forth. So I think we could recommend, if everybody agrees, that maybe that school becomes something that is readily available. Like, when you've all have jury duty, and right before you send the form in, you're supposed to watch the, to have something like that that's just available that people can go in and, and we could highly recommend that people review that or something.
Well, could it be taped and it get emailed to everybody who pulls papers?
Or every town
Whether they
meeting,
watch it or not is up to them at that point, but at least we've made an effort to get the information out.
Yeah, and if
Here,
that's-
you
if
pulled
that's sitting
papers,
on the-
watch for an email that will explain to you, because maybe some people would change their mind at that point and go, oh, I can't, I don't want to vote. I don't understand figures. I don't want to, well, that's what it is, because that's what I was saying about, when we get people running for trustee of the library, they get a trustee handbook. This is what we do. If you don't want to do this, then this isn't the committee for you. If you think you're going to do things other than what's in here, because that's beyond our scope of what we do. So I think that information should go out when people pull their papers so that they understand what being a town meeting member is. And and a little video of Pat speaking. Let's have her have DCAT tape her while she does a spiel, and that gets emailed to everybody when they pull the papers.
Or that could sit on the town.
Right, and be on the
website, so it's there
website,
all
and
the
be
time.
on the
Just make it
Facebook,
as
whatever,
accessible
yeah.
as possible.
Right, on the Facebook page, have it everywhere.
This kind of indirectly approaches the precinct caucus that I brought up, that people were kind of interested in, and so I feel good in the sense that we are ramping up the education, the responsibility, et cetera, because that was one of the reasons that I brought that up. And as I went back and looked at some of the notes, and I did, both from us and from other people who came in, it's littered with comments about that something needs to be done so that the people who are town meeting members feel more of an engagement. So I think by doing that, I feel good that that's happening. But the second part of my proposal for the precinct forum, I changed the name, is that the opportunity for the precinct members, the voters, to make contact and to get their ideas, et cetera, to the right places. And this will obviously, hopefully, make the town meeting members more aware of what they need to do, but that doesn't mean that all those people in precinct 2 are going to come to John Jaworski and say, oh, John, I have some issues with you. So that's the thing that I still struggle with, is opening that avenue where the precinct members can come. And I talked to one person who said, well, the precinct member, Mr. Jaworski, you can call that meeting anytime you want. That's true. but I'm not sure if that's something that the majority of people would look to do. So I guess the point I throw out, and this is not contrary to anything we've just discussed, is the idea is if we do put in this kind of a template of what it is to be a town meeting member, do we in some way include a responsibility to at least conduct some sort of forum, if you will, that members of your precinct can attend and therefore give ideas that you would then, as a precinct member, bring to the appropriate boards. So that would be something I'd like to get some feedback on and see how people felt about that. I don't know what that mechanism was. I presented something, as you know, in the proposal I had. Maybe there's others ways, or maybe we leave it up to the idea that the person spoke to me that says, you can do it anyway, so why would you even put it in writing?
I do think you're touching on something important with specifically regard to the forum of this idea of like, part of the accessibility is something more formalized that it sends a signal that it's open to all versus one particular member saying, okay, I'm gonna hold a forum. But then it's like, okay, well, am I only allowed to go if I know, I don't know, like, so I don't have a solution to that, but I think that's an important point of like, I think I'm 100% board. I think it's a great idea. I think it's just sort of figuring out that mechanism of how it can be sort of become something that's regular, that is, structured, but also that people feel like they are welcome, they can go share their thoughts. And I think the only way that can happen is if it's never going to be everybody, but I think it needs to be more than one person in my view, because I think that just doesn't feel as accessible and open.
Well, if you remember my proposal, which just kind of as a shot in the dark, was that you'd take a day at Danvers High School, you'd get 8 rooms. All the
Hold them all at
precincts,
the
all
same
the
time.
precincts would know that they would be there, at least, and I'm sure at least one of them would be there. And then everybody in that precinct, however the town would advertise that, all the people in the entire town would know, well, if I have some things that I need to share, I show up.
Right.
In terms of how that could happen, why couldn't it be something that the town meeting does itself? Like, there's a warrant on the town meeting for this year to have an event like this in whenever we think is appropriate. And, that could be something that every year is a warrant that gets voted on by town meeting. So maybe that's how it happens.
I did, not responding to you, John, but the person I talked to also, I asked them, well, when would be appropriate time if we did do some kind of meeting? And they says, well, you don't want to do it around the holidays, obviously, but any later than January, the wheels are turning.
Yeah.
And anything anything would come from precincts would probably not get a lot of attention. So their idea was you've got to do it in the fall time or immediately in the new year. So I just thought that was a piece of information I want to throw out to everybody.
That makes sense. That timing makes sense.
I also think it would be helpful to somehow get out to the whole town meeting member body after the first of the year, of a calendar, a timeline, budget starting now here, watch, so one of the things that you were saying was about, how do we keep a new person engaged? Well, we don't keep those of us that have been around for a while don't always stay engaged all year from one meeting to the next. I think reminders are helpful as people are busy. Oh, don't forget, the budget's starting, part of our responsibility of voting on the budget is maybe attend a budget hearing if you can, or please watch it on DCAT, or, like reminding people of like what the process is from January to our May town meeting.
The other thing, just quickly to put a cap on it for me, is that if we were to decide to do something, and it might be just as Sally was saying, as part of that quote package like you all have for the library, they receive this. And in it might be some indication that a precinct forum needs to be taken care of. I think it's critical, this came up in me talking with someone about the language you would use. You don't want to make it mandatory, But if I'm not saying our town meeting men is like teenagers, but I thought of this. If you have a teenage son and you want him to take out the trash, would you say, I suggest, I encourage, you should, or you're responsible to? Now, there's no consequences attached to that, really, but you can see the gradients of responsibility an individual feel. So I think if we do decide to go down this road of putting it in this packet or whatever we're doing, that the wording is going to be really important. And responsible to seem to be a lot better in my mind than the other options.
Well, it is our responsibility as elected members. It is a responsibility. We're being given a responsibility.
But the point would be they were responsible to attend this particular thing if we did do that.
Yeah, responsible to do a lot of things really that aren't being done.
For the trustees handbook, who develops that?
I think,
So
I think the moderator. I think the moderator did.
Did our handbook?
The town meeting handbook, I believe
No,
so?
no, the library trustee
Oh.
handbook.
Sorry.
okay.
I believe it was the the Library Association.
Oh, okay.
So it's a standardized, that applies to every library trustee board.
Okay.
I could look at the MMA site and see if they have something already.
Yeah, because I'm wondering again, just coming
It
back to the
probably is
question of
already, yeah.
ownership of who sort of puts this handbook together and manages. I don't know if that's the moderator or just.
It's probably out there,
Yeah.
but just because I know even our library trustee handbook wasn't always available to us.
Okay.
So I think the stuff is out there, we just need to make it part of our repertoire.
But just quickly, I think this is really admirable what we're talking about, the fact that we're emphasizing the responsibleness of the
Step
town
up the
meeting
game a little.
member. I think that's great for the town.
Absolutely.
John?
Before I forget, in this section 12, where it lists the folks subject to election in the town elections, again, the housing authority is missing here. So that might be something we want to add.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that before I forgot.
Thank you for that. So, do you want to vote tonight on whether or not section 12, the dates, the order should stay as is, or do you want to wait till our next meeting when there are more members present?
I'll
mean-
make a motion that we accept section 12 as has been amended by, did you make some amendments, Sally?
But these were to change the dates.
Okay, so
Change the dates.
I guess amendment, the
So maybe what I
move,
need to do is redraft section 12 and present it next meeting for
Okay.
everybody. Maybe that's it.
Like a clean version of. Yeah.
And the same may be true, I don't want to pull us off of the section 12 discussion too early, just because I was gonna, I have some ideas for, section 14, no, section 15.
15 was the other one.
So is it okay if I jump to 15?
Yeah, I'm done with 12.
Okay. So, section 15, again, this is of the Town Meeting Act, talks about, okay, what's the process, if you will, for approval? And after gathering the information from the town moderator, and I guess it's mostly the moderator, that maybe we should change it to say that our proposed changes to the Town Meeting Act will be submitted to the Select Board for approval, whereupon a warrant article shall be prepared by the Select Board, asking if town meeting will accept such changes, and upon acceptance, this modified act would be sent to the state legislature via home rule petition,
Add that to 15, you're saying?
or change,
Or
change 15
change-
to say that.
Oh, okay. So that's all, that, what you read would be 15?
And again, I did not have a chance to write that up, but I have notes,
Yeah.
that's where I just was reading from. Go ahead.
I'm still a little confused by that, including that in this town meeting act. Because what I'm seeing here is draft legislation for the legislature to work with. And what you're describing is what would happen prior to them getting it.
Well, and the reason is that if you look at section 15 right now,
Yeah.
it says this act will be submitted to the registered voters of the town at an election called for that purpose. And it goes on, and.
Right.
And that's not exactly the way it would work. After talking with emailing back and forth with the moderator, what happens is that our suggestions for changes would go to the select board for
Yeah.
approval. And then if they approve it, they would draft a warrant article, FinCom would review it, then it would go to town meeting. And it's after town meeting acts that it gets submitted to the state legislature. So I think it's okay for us to have that in here because of the way it's written now.
Yeah, but the way I understand it, the way it's written now is the legislature passed this bill with this section 15 in it and sent it back to the town for the town
And-
to adopt.
And what I'm trying to say is that's not the way it worked,
Okay,
or not the way it would work.
Should work.
well, that's
that-
not the way it
that-
would work now, like the process we're describing now. But when it originally happened,
Back when it first turned
Yeah.
from open to representative, I believe that's true, but I don't think in the amendments to it, because it has to,
Okay.
it has to go
Yeah.
back to the state legislature for some reason. You'd think there'd be some simpler amending process.
Yeah.
But, so I think it's okay for us to have the procedure here. So it's clear to the state legislature too, that they're not getting it until after the town has already approved it.
okay, so I'd have to, so the way that you, and again, my memory is terrible, the way that you just described it to us was that the town process is done?
And then it goes to the state
But the way,
legislature.
that's the way that you wrote it up,
Right.
is that the town process has been done, so here it is, legislature.
Well, no, I would spell out the process. I mean, maybe it would be, maybe I'm putting too many steps. Maybe all it has to say is this shall be submitted to town meeting for approval, and then to the state legislature.
But isn't that, so my read on that was the instructions were also for in 20 years when it's reviewed again, that it's almost like instructions. Because I'm looking at like, for the people who are doing this in 20 years, they don't want to be the same boat we are, where we're looking at a section 15 that is inaccurate. So I'm just saying, that's how that's sort of the importance of, for me, of section 15 is when people are reviewing in 20 years, there's no question about this is what the process is. I don't know if that makes sense. It's almost like an instruction as much as a,
It's a step-by-step.
right.
And especially if that's what the moderator thought,
And,
then,
and if I'm wrong, or if I've gotten, if that advice ends up not quite being right, I mean, technically it'd be submitted to town council, and town council could
Right.
say, no, we need to change it in this other way.
Yeah.
But at least one benefit, possibly, of putting it the way I did, that first, our work is submitted to the select board for approval, and if it's approved at that level, it gets on its way to town meeting for a vote, and then to the state. It's opening up the discussion of, okay, how are we gonna go forward? And if town council in review says, no, you gotta change that to this other language that the state expects to see, well, so be it. But we wanna show people what needs to be done to incorporate the changes we're suggesting now.
Yeah. The language that exists now, it strikes me as odd, because it suggests that whenever there's a change to this, there needs to be a vote, a town-wide election. But that hasn't been the case, right?
I guess not. I
Yeah,
mean, I
so
think it had to be in the first instance, when the town switched from open meeting to representative
Yeah.
town meeting, because there wasn't a representative town meeting to vote for it, so only
Yeah.
the voters had to vote, say, okay, we're gonna basically give up power that citizens had to attend, open meetings, and grant that power instead to their elected representatives that hadn't even been elected yet, you know what I mean? So in the first instance, it had to first be approved by everybody. I don't know if in each amendment it went that way or not. I have tried, but I've been
Yeah.
unable to get that information.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this 15 as it is now is very much not accurate. I mean, it was accurate for back then, but it's not, the whole thing needs to go, I think, yeah. Do you guys want her to read it again?
I mean,
What-
is it, I don't know, like, I don't know, are you saying we should, would you say, are you trying to say we should remove it entirely? Like, are you saying section 15 is not necessary? I'm just trying to,
That's kind of my perspective.
Okay.
is that I
Oh,
don't
okay.
think it's
because I was,
necessary.
that's what I was coming around to, and I had initially said maybe it's sort of like an instruction for future, but if the process is set and the moderator knows what the process is, then maybe
Right,
it's
if
not
someone else has-
necessary.
Yeah, why do we even need it in
Then
there?
why do we even need it in there, which I, okay, like, now I understand what you're saying.
Like, right now, it says, "This act should be submitted to the registered voters of the town at an election call for that purpose." And what I'm suggesting is we change that to say this act should be submitted to the town meeting, to the representative town meeting.
Right, and I guess the question is that even necessary, because,
Because it would be after the fact.
right,
Because it would be, the town meeting would have already voted and sent this to the legislature. So if it becomes law, then we wouldn't need to do that again.
It's reciting what happened to bring it to the legislature.
Yeah, so if you wrote it in the past tense, I guess.
yeah.
Or,
like-
You know what I
or
mean?
is it meant for down the line when it's reviewed again?
Well, that's what my thought was, but it's almost like it doesn't need to be because the moderator knows the process. So I think this is just a unique situation because this was a different process because this was going from open to representative. So I guess that's the question is like, do we feel we want it in there just as like in case someone forgets? I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, people do forget. I mean,
Right.
I can't find out how they did it in
Yeah.
'73, which was the last time this act was amended. And to me, that doesn't sound like it fell that long ago, but I was reminded that it actually is a long time ago.
Well, in 20 years from now is a long, like it would be all brand-new people, you know?
I take this first sentence as simply meaning that it's leaving our hands and it's going to town meeting. Where it'll be voted on. We're done with it. Our work is done. Now town meeting gets it, and from there it goes through the rest of the process.
Well, someone can put that in a form of a motion.
Well, what I would like, what I prefer to do is to write a proposed section 15. I think that's better than, because it's always tricky when we vote and there's not something that we're voting on, it's been pre-written.
I
Makes it
agree.
hard after the fact. So how about if I write it up, and if it's still striking you, John, as being unnecessary and backward, then we can all discuss it that way.
Okay.
Did you have something, Natalie?
No, I didn't know. I think we need that in a form of a motion, though, so I'll make a motion that we table the discussion of section 15 again until next meeting after you rewrite a proposal.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, looking back to my notes for tonight's meeting. So I would ask that everybody for our next meeting, take some time to look at the so-called clean copy that I provided tonight, and anybody that could not attend tonight, it was in the email that I sent yesterday. On the face of the document, it begins with Danvers Town Meeting / Town Manager Acts Review Committee, Sally Calhoun, Mike Matvichuk, and John Almeida's recommended changes, along with committee's votes on 11-6 to Chapter 294, Acts of 1930 for discussion, Danvers Town Meeting Act. So what I've sent everybody is still triple spaced, but except for sections 12 and 15, it's no longer redlined. It incorporates the changes that we've all agreed to and voted on. And at our next meeting, hopefully, we will resolve the last two sections and we'll be done with that act. So I would ask people to review that, make sure it's accurate and that you haven't missed anything. And then at our next meeting, we'll discuss more of the recall provision. And if we have time, we'll get into the Town Manager Act, which I think our discussion will be much narrower, much shorter, because there's really only a few things in there. Oh, I got an email just this afternoon, and I wasn't at a computer, I was only looking on my phone, from the Water and Sewer Board, saying that they've studied the issues, because I asked all boards to let us know if they had any ideas for change. And though they said it much more completely and eloquently, that they've concluded that they don't have any suggestions for changes at this time. I will forward that to everybody.
Before you adjourn, can I just?
Oh, please, yep. It's definitely the end of our meeting anyway, so please come up and tell us what you're here for.
My name is Lauren Steves. I am in precinct 3. I actually just, it's more like questions, comments, and opinions.
Could I ask you, Laura, I'm sorry, if you could spell your last name?
Yep, it's Steeveves.
Thank you. Precinct 3, you said.
Yes. My first question, I'm like very new to just learning about local government, and I read over the town manager and the town meeting act, and I'm trying to understand how the warrant articles work, just because I went before the select board on Tuesday night, I think it was this week, in regards to the workshop that they had last week when they had suggested recommending eliminating the residency requirement for the town manager act. And I was told by the chair of the select board that it's essentially this committee that would recommend to them. He basically said that you guys would do the warrant article, but it sounds like you would make the recommendation to them and they would write the warrant article. Am I understanding that correctly or no?
Is there a reason that your question is specifically about the warrant article? Or is it about the decision?
I guess my question is who puts it forward? Because when I wanted to just express my opinion on the requirement on it, and he said to come here. He kind of didn't want to listen to me, to be quite honest.
And I'll tell you the reason I asked the question, because we've been town meeting members, some of us for a while, and let's say the zoning board was, from time to time, they'll make recommendations to make changes to the zoning bylaw. And the zoning board will work on that for quite a while, and then they will present their suggested changes to the select board. And if the select board approves, that matter becomes something that's voted on by town meeting. So a warrant article is written that typically says, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, typically says the zoning board recommends the attached changes. So what we'll do, in terms specifically of the example you give is the residency requirement of the town manager, we will make our recommendation as to how we think that language should read. We will send our report to the select board, who will then decide whether or not to forward it to town meeting. It's hard for me to imagine, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, that they wouldn't forward our recommendations because town meeting voted to have our committee meet and do this work. So I would assume, I mean, we might have discussions back and forth with the select board, et cetera, et cetera. We might find that something that we've suggested isn't isn't in keeping with something in the town bylaws or whatever. But I would expect that this committee's suggestion would then make it to town meeting.
Okay, so I guess my question is kind of twofold, is that this residency requirement in the Town Manager Act would essentially go before a town meeting to be voted on, to be changed in the Town Manager Act, correct?
Correct.
Whether the warrant article because the warrant article could come from this committee, or it could come from the select board, correct? Or
Well,
incorrect?
You know, the way we could get it is if we had if we created a citizens petition like Mike did for the recall. But since we were established by vote of the town meeting to give our recommendations to the select board, I think the select board would be the one that would originate it. If we felt that they weren't acting and we felt that, you know, as the rebels that we are, we should push to have a, but I mean, I hadn't really dwelled on that question because I can't assume it would be an issue, but again, why?
I'm just here basically as a citizen of this town to
Mhm.
just express that it's in there now, and I agree with keeping it in there. I know we're only one of the few towns or cities in this state that still have that residency requirement. But I think having a town manager who lives in this town obviously gives them a more vested interest in how the town is run. I think having someone who doesn't live here can provide kind of a disconnect from the community, possibly reduced engagement with residents, reduce kind of accountability and transparency. And I understand that. I know the chair of the select board kind of made comments about the price of housing and having to move. I don't know. I just personally, I feel that keeping it in there is in the best interest, and I just wanted to, as a public meeting, just make that opinion known.
Absolutely. Well, you began with, I responded initially with procedurally kind of issues, because that's just how my brain works. But you've come to the right place to express your opinion. And I'm glad that you came. I mean, I don't want you to get stuck on the procedural stuff I was trying to talk
I was just more
through.
curious how it worked.
Yeah.
I wanted to know how it worked
Right.
too, so.
But this is definitely the place, and I would assume that, you know, we may end up making a recommendation that might not be the same as yours, but
Right.
I think in our explanation report, in our little cover memo, we would explain that we've heard, you know, opinions from many people, some who agree and some who don't.
Mhm.
So it's important for us to know.
And then I guess just my second question, the last meeting, I watched the last meeting, not the workshop, but the one you guys had, I think November 6th, discussing changing precinct town meeting from 18 members down to 15 members. Is that something that was voted on or you intend to suggest? I can't remember.
I think it's done, right?
Well, we voted,
We have,
we
as
voted as
we
a
have
committee.
committee.
As a committee, we voted to recommend that, but we don't have the authority to change.
So that will go in front of town meeting as well? Okay, that was just my curiosity on that, if that
Yeah.
goes in front of town meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, that's all.
And,
Did you
and
have an opinion on that?
I do.
Go ahead. That's what you're here
I
for.
disagree with
Yeah.
it, which is fine. I think, I understand the lack of engagement, but also the conversation that you guys had tonight was that how can we get more people engaged? We can do X, Y, Z, maybe we haven't tried this. And I think taking 24 seats away diminishes voices in the community. And I've never run for town meeting, and this year it came up that it's something that I'm considering. And I don't know, I mean, you're gonna put it in front of town meeting, and I don't know how many people are gonna vote to have their seats taken away.
Mhm.
So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, so, just in case you didn't hear like our reasoning for it, it was to try to get more qualified people
Yeah, I
instead of.
understand that.
Because I mean,
More
having.
engaged, more
Yeah, more
engaged.
engaged, yeah, more engaged. Yeah, because I mean, we could vote to increase it also, but is
Right.
that really gonna benefit
Mhm.
anybody in the long run?
Yeah.
I think that was the reasoning,
Mhm.
was, you know, it would give It would give a seat to the more engaged.
Right.
The ones who really want to be there,
Mhm.
who want to really
Mhm.
do the job.
Yeah, I heard both sides, I heard the 2 and the 4, so.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the 2 things that I wanted to speak about.
And again, to clarify, both for you and for anybody else who's, you know, watching or paying attention to this process, just the fact that we as a committee might recommend something doesn't mean that that's gonna be the law. It's
Right.
subject to town meeting vote, and town meeting can take it apart, you know, sentence by sentence, clause by clause, and, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down. So just the fact that this is going to be, that we're gonna make a recommendation, doesn't mean that that's gonna be how the law is gonna end up.
Right, and that's why I want to clarify. Like I said, I'm very new to like kind of investigating and doing my research on how everything works. So that's why I wanted just kind of clarification on how the whole process works. Because it's kind of hard to find information on the town website.
And there's stuff like that's,
Something we've been discussing.
yeah, and also some of the language is not familiar, like, I mean, warrant article, what the heck is a warrant article? And so it's like hard to know how to even raise the question,
And
so.
I think, and I obviously have never done this, I'm not part of this, but maybe that's where the lack of engagement comes from. Is people, it's so hard to find any of this information if you don't do it. And I don't know how to remedy that. I don't have a solution for that, but that's just a thought.
Well, hopefully, some of the things we discussed tonight that we'd like to do, or that we would recommend for town meeting going forward is having
More of that all year long, so that people understand what's coming up next.
and what would be beneficial for them to do as a town meeting member. So hopefully, some of the things, what I personally hope is that town meeting members don't, and certainly I think that we will all lobby and talk about why we're putting in this work and effort and listening to so many people and taking everybody's opinions into consideration. And I'm hoping that when town meeting votes on this, they don't just vote on it without understanding how we came to suggest all of these things, is my hope. So, yeah.
It's available on YouTube for them to watch.
Right. Yes.
Thank you for your time. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Is that
coming.
it?
Our whole
Is that
meeting.
it?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, did you say you were not a town meeting member?
I am not,
No,
no.
she's
I
thinking
would
about
recommend
it,
you
though.
run.
Yes,
I
she's
actually, I do plan on it.
Yeah.
So, I actually, there's a vacancy in my precinct right now. I don't know why, but
It
Do it.
happens, yes.
Do it.
But-
What
Yep.
precinct are you in?
thank you.
What precinct?
3.
3. Mhm. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
for
very much.
coming. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. I feel like I've covered the things that I had put on the agenda that I hoped that we would cover for tonight, but is there something that you, because we still have another 20 minutes, 18.
I saw the email from Mark Hannon,
That was in the
Also-
packet. He's a
also-
town meeting member.
also expressing his displeasure at the reducing the number. And I think really what it's gonna come down to is just really explaining to people how we came to that decision. And hopefully they'll understand what our method to our madness was. You know,
Also, if Sally, you said that you anticipate that if we move through the Town Manager Act, that it may move a little more swiftly. However, there are I think there are two major issues.
Right.
And that will take, some
A lot of time.
hashing through.
I agree.
So I would expect that they'd probably be put front and center
Mm-hmm.
as we begin that discussion, at least to deal with that first, and then we can go through the rest of it.
That's a good idea. And I recognize that those are two really big issues. We're talking about the residency requirement and moving the town accountant title out of where it is. And I don't mean to diminish the work that's necessary. I just think that we won't be down in the weeds of language as much as we are with the Town Meeting Act.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's a big picture issue that we probably would hash out as well, is sort of do we appreciate, do we want to maintain the strong town manager framework that we have? And I think that's a bigger picture thing, and if we kind of
Right.
resolve that in a bigger picture way, one way or the other, then the task is clear, right? But I think we need to have that discussion.
Right. And I did speak with someone on the select board to ask what the plan was as they're searching, or as they're getting the search company hired to start doing the actual searching for a new town manager. And any applicants coming in, if we, because it'll be before this all gets voted on, to say that there is the potential that we vote that the town manager description that is going out might not be the one that ends up being enacted, voted on. So, and I was told, yes, that would be knowledge for anybody applying.
Knowing that the act is being reviewed right now.
Correct, and could change, and could change from a strong manager to, strong town manager to.
Do you know, I mean, I don't think that this process is gonna happen super quickly. Like, my understanding is we're talking a couple of years before, realistically, before the rubber's hitting the road. But how long would the,
I don't know if that's true, Mike. And I'll tell you the reason I think that is that, the select board had to appoint an acting town manager.
Yeah.
And it's a 6-month appointment, and they can extend it another time.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they can go beyond that.
no, what I was referring to is our
This
process.
process,
our
our
process.
process, yeah.
Like, in terms of getting a home rule petition before the legislature, them acting, I think it was Senator Lovely's description of it, didn't seem like it was a super lightning fast
Sally,
process.
it was, yes,
Yeah,
when
it was
Sally
about
was
Karen's.
here.
Yeah,
Karen's.
Sally.
The other,
Karen's, yeah.
the other Sally.
The other Sally.
But that being the
Not our
case,
favorite
what,
Sally.
She says
like
that
you.
all
what,
the time.
what would the term of the contract be for the new town manager?
Yeah, so aren't they usually 5-year contracts?
Yeah, so it might be a little
Yeah.
change, it potentially could change in
potentially,
the
right.
midstream for
Which,
that.
which was something that I wanted to pose the question. I just happened to be at the same event, and I'm like, oh, well, while you're here, I have a question. When that goes out, is that going to be discussed with any potential applicants, that the job description could change? So, yeah. I think there's 3 big, I think there's not just 2 things. I think it's gonna be 3 big questions on that,
What do you think,
Act.
what are the three? There are
The-
two of- Go ahead.
the 2 that we discussed,
Okay.
but then whether we keep with the strong town manager or take some of it.
Okay, so I guess I equated that strong town manager with the distribution of power, if you will. So was there something else? So I'm missing something.
The residency.
Yep.
The, taking the accountant out of the.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and then that.
Thank you.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Interesting. Is there anything else?
No, I think this was great.
Well, thank you all very
We're
much.
making,
Motion to
we're
adjourn?
making
Can I just
progress.
ask one question?
Oh,
Going-
please.
Going back to the vote on the minutes of the last meeting,
Yes.
the 6 of us here, I was not at the last meeting, so I technically didn't vote. Do we have a quorum with 5 people to pass that?
No.
No.
So thank you very much for pointing that out.
Right. That's right. I thought you were on Zoom, no?
No, not last time. It's
Okay.
the only time I
Well-
didn't make Zoom.
Okay.
If I could, my understanding is that the quorum is just to have the meeting. You don't necessarily need.
No,
you just need
quorum
a
is to
majority
vote on.
You just need a majority of vote.
Most,
Okay, if that's the way we
yeah,
want to operate.
You're thinking
Yeah.
majority of who's present?
Yeah,
We have a quorum for this meeting, but we don't have a quorum to
For
vote
voting.
on
We-
the last
you s-
meeting because I wasn't present.
right, but what I'm saying is, you're abstaining from voting. That doesn't affect the fact that it's a legitimate vote. That's my perspective on it.
Well,
Is that what-
most boards and commissions you have to have a quorum of the board, of the committee, whatever, to vote.
see what you're saying. We have a quorum, but I abstained.
Yeah,
The
Member
last
has
time this happened, we had to revote the next meeting, that's all I know. I don't remember the rationale. It was just,
Yeah.
we just
If we
decided we
want-
needed to vote again.
yeah, if we want to vote again, it'll
Yeah.
just take a second.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
Better to be safe.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
All right, can I second John's motion?
Yes. Yes, all in favor? Aye.
Don't
Thank
steal
you.
Sally's line.
That's right, I should say all
You
in
have to
favor.
say it. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Yeah.
opposed?
Nope.
Thank you.
Well, that works out, because now we will be out of here so that the other group can start right at 7, so.
Thank you, DCAT.